So we're not seeing too much problem with the double locking of controlled substances. It's more that the counting is not being done. And that was cited 42 times. When I took a look back at the last fiscal year, I just want to let you know that our surveyors are trained that when we're on site, because we have limited resources, that we are to focus on the most concerning things to residents first. And so what that means to them, and boy, they don't like it, is that when they come back, they write those most concerning deficiencies first. They are given time frames in which to complete deficiency lists. If there's a deficiency that they would have cited, but they can't cite it because they're out of time and it's an A level, perhaps it will go under tag 999, which is an ALR final observation tag. And we did that 45 times during the last rating period. The other stat that I'll mention to you is that out of the top 25 cited deficiencies, 7 of those were medication administration related tags. So medications are still a strong deficiency in assisted living. So the other trends that are up on the slideshow that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, these have to do with situations where we've had actual harm to residents. So we've had areas, as I mentioned before, we've had times where the outdoor areas unsecured aren't monitored. We've had people left down overnight. We've had people living in assisted living facilities who require 2 or more persons to get them out of bed, to help them ambulate because maybe they're heavy or maybe they're just awkward for the current staff that's on site. But if they can't evacuate, and if one person and there's one person on overnight, that's an immediate jeopardy situation that has to be resolved immediately, because that's putting residents at grave risk in the event of a fire. And we've had quite a few of those. That's an automatic E deficiency, which automatically requires a fine. We've had situations where there's been allegations of abuse and neglect being made by staff, perhaps, by families, by other residents. The facility doesn't do anything about it, and it continues, putting a residence at harm. And we've had to cite alcohol level deficiencies in that area. We've had restraints being used in assisted living. Somebody doesn't want to be restrained. They're trying to get out from around it, whether it's a side rail or such, and the facility doesn't realize that it's a restraint. They think it's okay because the daughter said it was okay, and someone's been hurt. So we've had a situation like that as well. So these are just some of the things that we're seeing out there as far as the kind of the current trends, the themes of what comes upon my desk when our team, our site is citing harm. When my team is out at your facility, and if they come upon harm, when they call in, which is a requirement, they're going to let us know right away what they're seeing. And we, Michelle and I, and sometimes Elaine will get involved as well, we will direct the team on how to proceed to make sure, number one, that we have the facility put things in place to ensure that that harm is corrected, and number two, to make sure that we have all the information that we need pertaining to that situation of deficient practice. Any questions about kind of the themes and what we're seeing out there?
Do you see a pattern regarding counties, cities, large homes, small homes, where the deficiencies and what type most often occur?
So she's asking if we're seeing patterns. Maybe like, are these things being cited in a central area of Denver versus rural area? And what's your other examples, like?
Size of facility.
Size of facility. So Elaine asked me the same question a year ago, and she asked me pretty much the same question like every 3 months, because she just wants to know. And what I'll tell you is that there seems to be some patterns. And so here's the one pattern. The harm level deficiencies are not happening so often in Medicaid facilities as they are in private pay. So that's number one. That's a pretty definitive. Number two, it's not happening in a certain area. It's all over the state. Because we've driven south and we've driven north and central. It seems to me that Grand Junction doesn't seem to have as much issues as the facilities on this side of the slope. I will say that. Because we just don't have a lot of intermediate conditions that happen over there, but granted there's less facilities. So it's hard to make that comparison. our small ACF facilities quite lately have gotten themselves into a little bit of trouble, and I'll tell you why that's happening. Please, 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 always remember that if you get a management company or somebody to come in to work with you and help you run your facility, number one, you're required to report it to us. It's in Chapter 2. And that doesn't always happen. And so then all of a sudden we get wind of a problem, and we're like, well, who's this person? Because that's not the administrator of record. So we realize that there's been a management company coming in to run the facility. We never knew about it. And so perhaps somebody that's running this facility is not somebody that we would even approve as administrator anyway. So facilities, you know, particularly people, maybe they're on the edge of retirement. I'm going to hand my facility over to this person, let them run it for a little while. Everything will be fine. I'm going to retire in 2 years. And then here in Colorado, it blows up. And so who are we calling on the phone? The administrator of record. And so we've had some issues lately with some small facilities. So please, 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 if you ever have any questions about a management company or having somebody come in to run your facility or to work with you, please call us and we can help you with what's required for Chapter 2.
So Dee, I have a question. This is Bill over here. First of all, folks, if you have a question, we'd like to get it in the microphone because we're transcribing this. So I have a question and then I want you to answer another one.
Okay.
One of the goals of REACH was to, on some level, be able to standardize the surveyors and the survey. I understand the challenges, and you kind of alluded to that in the conversation that we had. But it seems like it was really, really good in the beginning. Everybody seemed to be on the same page. But it seems like there's a little bit of drift going on. And if you can address that. Second thing is, could somebody give me a show of hands who has the administrator license? Okay. Number one, it's not a license. So Dee, if you can address that.
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit before Dee tackles this first question, and then Dee can jump right in and talk at the program level. When we did the reorganization at the division and the realignment, we vowed to consolidate our systems, meaning that, as example, when we send a deficiency list out for an assisted living, for a home health, for a hospice, for a nursing home, there are certain components in the deficiency list that are the same for every single deficiency list. But if we have a provider that's licensed for all of those things and they get the deficiency lists, the way in which they are presented is different. The layout is different. There are so many things in there that are different that don't have to be different between the programs. So some of what we've been working on is internal and hasn't been rolled out external yet. And it's a pretty heavy lift, as you might imagine, from your own facilities. When folks have been doing something for a long, long time, change is hard. And then there's this history of people, myself included, this is the way we've always done it. And if I don't keep this piece, I think I might be missing something. So there's been a lot of giving and taking in order to come up with some consolidation just within our division and all the different branches that we oversee, the program and the provider types that we oversee. So as you can imagine, as we start to roll out some of those small successes where we've all agreed this can be the same in all of these things, we roll that out to the program. The impact to the program is you have staff, again, that are saying, we've always done it this way, and now they've changed it, and they've changed so many things, and I can't keep up with it. So it's a stressful time in the department. We do our best, I think, to keep the level up, but, and I think the staff have been very, very good at welcoming the change, understanding the change, and honoring the change, but I don't doubt that that doesn't have an impact all the way from the top to the bottom. So then I'll let you finish your answer there.
So here, let me explain a little bit about the survey process, because one question that I often get asked, let's say that I'm an owner and I own 5 small facilities. So the survey team goes out to facility A and they find something. And so then So then maybe like the next 6 months they go out to facility B. Facility B might be doing the same thing, but we don't pick it up because maybe we don't get any concerns about it. So I think one of the things that kind of actually drives me a little nuts is that we look at every facility differently. And what I mean by that is we don't go in with any preconceived notion. Our survey is driven by what we see, what we hear, and what the residents tell us. So let's say that I come out to your facility and you have an issue where you're using restraint, but you have like 4 more facilities. I'm not going to go to these other facilities. The reason why I found the restraint is because a resident told me, oh, they're using a seatbelt on me at night. So that's my trigger to dig into that. I'm not going to go out to your other facilities and just start dog-nosing for restraints. Unless I see it, somebody points it out to me as a problem. That's not how we survey anymore. And so, number one, we can't keep track of all of you. We don't have even a system that could ever be able to do that. And number two, we honestly don't think that's very fair. It's coloring perception. I don't tell my surveyors, you know, back when I was 32 years old, I went to this facility and I cited that, so you better check it this time. That's ridiculous. We really want our resources put to being on site. What do I see? What am I being told? And what are the concerns I'm getting? That drives the rest of the day. So that's how we survey. So like somebody might say, well, I've been doing this for 2 years and nobody ever told me about it. Well, maybe it wasn't triggered. Maybe we didn't see it. Maybe nobody brought it to us as a complaint. But now we see it and we're going to address it. So I can see feel the frustration maybe on your part. Somebody should have told you sooner, but maybe we didn't see it. Sometimes when we're out of facilities, there's a big issue. And so all of our resources and attention gets put to our time with those big issues. And we might not get to look at personnel files. We might not get to look at some other things that we typically do. And that's just the nature of the beast because we can't come back. There's 554 of you, and I have now 9 surveyors. And so that's the ratio.
Do your surveyors look at the previous survey history before they come out for their survey?
They do. They do. That's part of their pre-survey tasks. They look at what you were studying for last time just to have an idea. They want to be aware if you were under an intermediate condition or not. So they will look at that. It doesn't mean that they're going to go absolutely digging full bore into that, but they want to be aware. They look at occurrences. They talk to the ombudsman. That's all part of our pre-survey process.
He was asking about your other question was, how many of you have an administrator license? And a ton of you raised your hand.
That's right. Okay. So yes,
It's not a license.
I've had a lot of calls lately from people saying, I hear you're going to change the regulations for administrator. I have my license. And so, but maybe I want some of my friend to get a license too because you're going to change the regs. So I call them back and I'm like, it's not a license. It's a certification. And yes, we're going to make changes. Well, I don't know if anybody I know can meet the tiers. I'm sure they can. They tell me what those are. I'm telling them what we're thinking about regulation revision. But I think there's a little bit of a panic out there about changes in administrator. We'll talk about that in a little while. Okay, so I'm going to move on because one more question.
Oh, sorry. Earlier at lunch today, too, we were talking about this. Community got cited because they didn't have coffee available to the residents during the whole day hours. And the residents wanted that. And they would stop coffee in the afternoon time. And the facility got cited for that. Because it could have been under the environment tag or resident choice. You know, we talked about that 24-hour food. But can you then fine-tune your agreement and so that when residents are coming in, they know, like, are we gonna have to fine-tune our leases to the point where they say, we serve 2 glasses of 6 ounces of milk a day. We serve coffee till 2 p.m. so that they know that kind of stuff, because, you know, a lot of us can't do that cost-wise.
Okay, so I have a couple of reactions to that. They're kind of negative. So
That's okay.
But so number one, you know, Medicaid rules require you to be home-like, and so you know, if I can't get my M&M's, my peanut butter, and maybe a beer when I'm 80 years old at night, I'm getting really upset. And so, but that kind of is upsetting. And so what I'll tell you is, a lot of times when we cite things like that, it's because the residents had access and all of a sudden it was taken away. And so we want to explore why. What is the reason why this is happening? So when we look at those types of deficiencies that we've cited, there's always usually, well, somebody decided that they were drinking too much milk, or somebody decided that they shouldn't have coffee, even though as part of our pre-admission assessment, it said that they drank coffee every night. And so why are we then forcing residents into a box and we're not making it home-like? So I have a lot of issues with people considering wanting to put stuff in their written agreement that violates resident rights. And resident rights give residents a right for choices and care and treatment. And so I just think that you all need to do a very good job with your pre-admission assessment process to identify whose needs you can't meet. That's where it starts. I remember talking to somebody who said they were doing a pre-admission assessment for a gentleman who weighed, a large amount of weight, and they felt like they could not meet his needs dietary-wise because this gentleman would eat 8 times a day. So they have every right and they have the power at assessment time before this person is admitted to make a decision, can I meet their needs or not? That's when those decisions are appropriate. It's not after that they're in, then all of a sudden you want to put a hammer down. So I have a little bit of issue with that, and I know it dances around so many regulations. There's maximum degree of benefit, there's residents' right to choices, there's home-like regulations that we have for ACF. So we are going to dig into situations like that to find out, number one, why. Why did it change? If it's for cost, then that's bothersome. Because again, you have residents who were expected a certain level of service that aren't getting it anymore. So I don't know if...
But if it never
There's another piece to that as well that I think Medicaid will probably weigh in on a little bit. It has to do with settings, rule, and choices, and access. And that rule went into effect through CMS, the federal government, to address these kinds of things. You have to be very careful about what is on a very high scale, and I mean conceptually up here when we're talking about it, warehousing. These are individuals with individual needs, and everybody has individual wants and desires, and we all don't fit in the same box. And a lot of facilities nationally, we're trying to make people fit in the same box. It just doesn't work. It's just like in the school system, when you have a few rambunctious kids, and back in the day, they were putting everybody on Ritalin. Same thing. You have to be able to go to that individual and creatively find a way to meet their needs. So what I would challenge you in a situation like that is to get the residents, get your staff, maybe have an internal meeting with staff first and then meet with the residents and brainstorm how to make it happen. It's not necessarily just one way. And sometimes somebody has an idea that you're just not thinking of that would solve it for everybody, and maybe concessions and an agreement would occur. So think outside the box when you're trying to meet them halfway in some of those requests.
I know it's a hard topic, I really do. Lane and I have talked about this too. There is a verbiage in Chapter 2 that talks about a waiver. And so if ever that you think you have a good plan in place on how to meet the regulation in a way that's different, we would definitely encourage you to look at doing a waiver. We've received a couple of them. They've been denied, but because they just weren't good enough quite to really kind of at least hit part of the regulation. But I would certainly think that there's some opportunity in these areas to think about a waiver. Any question?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Kind of, since you mentioned waivers, many years ago, we got a staffing waiver so that we didn't have to have one per, yeah, the nighttime waiver. And we got a kitchen waiver because we're licensed for 20, but we only serve 18, it would have been too costly to put in a commercial kitchen. I've heard that those waivers may at some point not be honored anymore. Can you speak to that?
I can speak to that a little bit. So our department does not issue waivers for Medicaid rules. So if you have a waiver for a Medicaid rule, it would be with Medicaid's department. And I know that annually our department reviews waivers to decide if they're still valid and necessary. Certainly if you had a deficiency that had to do with the components of the waiver, you might lose that waiver. And that's just from our department's perspective. There's been, change in staff at Medicaid, and whatever waivers you may have been granted before might be looked at again by the program. Typically, I'll tell you, most of the time, the only way that you're going to get a waiver, at least with our department, is if you show how you meet the intent of the rule and why, in your certain circumstances, you can't quite get there, but you're very close. Oftentimes, it has to do with rural settings and some capacity for certain things. We see it frequently in hospitals. There's a whole host of rural hospitals have to follow, and there are certain things that they just can't get there in a rural setting. All of our waivers are reviewed at a program level, and they go all the way up to the division director for review and approval or denial. So, and then as I said, every year we review them to see if they're still valid, necessary, etc. So if it's Medicaid, I would suggest that you...
And since that's our Chapter 7 reg, and I know your facility, and a long time ago, we used to give facilities that are old as yours are, we used to give them waivers from the retail food regs,
Right.
not to have a commercial kitchen. And so in the future, we're going to have discussions about dietary and assisted living, because as you know, we have done a pilot. We've had some people from our Consumer Protection Agency go out and look at some of our assisted living residences' kitchens. So more to come in the future on dietary. I'm just trying to figure out how it all fits in. So I want to jump to my last slide. And this one really, actually I have a couple more, but this is pretty much what I do. Unfortunately, my main job at the health department is enforcement. And so Elaine and I spend a lot of time talking about outcome level deficiencies and trying to figure out what plan we can put into place for a facility to address corrections. And it could be, more often than not, it's a consultant. So we do warrant consultants quite a bit to help facilities achieve compliance. I'm happy to say that in the last few weeks we've been out to some facilities and they've had a consultant and we walk in and everything is corrected. And the facilities are happy and they've learned a lot and they love the consultant and they're going to retain them for future. And the residents are great and that's a win-win. So in those cases we really feel like the work that we've done with the facility and their work that they've done with the consultant has been extremely successful. So those are the moments of greatness that I celebrate, and I celebrate on your behalf as well. I do want to let you know that for desk revisits, when we are contacting you and asking you to submit things to us for a desk revisit, because we're not going to come out to look at it, we're going to do a desk revisit, or if we're calling you and asking you to submit information for plan of correction, we want you to do that. We want you to be responsive. We want you to be timely. We are in a position now where we don't have a choice but to find people who aren't responsive. And so these are people who we've contacted over and over and over again, and we've called them over and over and over again, and it's been 2 months and we still don't have a plan of correction. So we're getting to the point where we have to stop the hand-holding and we're going to start to find. So we're trying to get the word out because it's just become a necessary tactic because we can't spend the resources chasing people around. So please, 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 just be responsive and timely and you'll be fine. But if you hear grumbles, that's where it's coming from. All right, so regulation revision. I don't know how many of you are listening in, participating by Adobe Connect, or attending in person. How many? Okay. Few of you. Okay, good, good, good. So as always, I'm a big proponent of encouraging you to listen in, attend, get the meeting minutes from whoever might be attending from your organization, read the minutes on our website, just stay abreast of what's happening. Sure.
Can I say something?
Sure.
We're having conference calls to review the meetings.
Okay.
We're also doing QMAP.
Last Friday of the month.
Last Friday
Last
night.
Friday.
Last Friday of the month, you're having conference calls to review
ALR,
ALR
ACF,
meeting,
QMAP,
meeting.
ALR meeting, QMAP meeting,
ACF.
ACF meeting,
Good. Excellent.
to keep you
Okay.
connected.
That's good. Well, these are the things that we've already run by the Assisted Living Advisory Committee. We've reached some type of consensus. So, so what happens is we have a regulation that we want changed, or maybe somebody in the committee has suggested that we need some changes. We come together as a group. We first develop that, yes, we do have consensus. We don't like this regulation. We want some changes. And then we formulate ideas about how to change it. And then we come back and we write down some of our suggested proposed language, we mull it over, and oftentimes we take it away and we come back. So that's our process. But these are the areas that we have consensus on for making some changes. So we want to add some more resident rights than what we currently have. And when we consider proposed changes, we're not only thinking about our current regulations, but we're always thinking about the different programs that we have in the Colorado Health Department, which we regulate. We want to be similar. We want to be similar to nursing homes. We want to be similar to what's in other regulations that we currently have for resident rights. We're trying to be more consistent as a department. So we are looking at doing some more resident rights. We are looking at beefing up the administrator qualifications. We are looking at perhaps having people qualified as administrator for certain tiers and level of experience. We don't want a caregiver who started yesterday and is promoted the next day as administrator. We don't want that to happen. And you guys might think it doesn't happen, but it just happened last week. So that's
It happens a lot.
yeah, and so that's why we want the levels, the tiered levels of administrator experience and qualifications, so we don't have someone that just worked as a caregiver one day, you're good, we're going to flip you as administrator the next day, and they don't know anything, and then we have resident outcome. We want to beef up, we already have a grievance procedure in our current regulations, but we also want to add some more verbiage in there about complaints, because grievances and complaints are pretty much the same thing. The old definition of grievances, it has a little bit different connotation than complaints. So we want the facility to be more accountable towards complaints so that they can address them in accordance with some steps that we'll have within regulation. One of the things that we've talked about early on in regulation revision that we have to go back to is limited nursing. So we touched upon it, we're going to come back to it towards the end of our regulation review. We want to figure out how to provide protections to the frail elderly that we typically have in our private pay facilities. What type of protection and oversight do those type of people need if they meet a certain level of criteria, or if they require a certain level of assistance, which is beyond higher than your typical assisted living resident. So we're going to come back to that. Emergency response is another area that we want to beef up within our regulations because, as you know, Hurricane Katrina was a big wake-up call. And ever since then, there's been a lot of work on emergency response, not only on local, city, and county levels, but also state and federal. We want our facilities to be better armed for when things could happen and to also consider things that they don't now, such as actual and threatened acts of violence. How many times have you had a caregiver get mad at the other caregiver that works down at the end of the hall, and they get in a fight, and you get involved because you're the administrator, and this caregiver walks out of the building and says, you know, I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to come back here and shoot you. That's happened. And so that's an actual threat of violence. You deal with that every day. But we want facilities to have a policy because it's happening more often, unfortunately. So that's something along that vein that we want to talk about. You know, we require everybody to have one person on each shift that's first aid certified, but we don't say that you have to use that training. So now you're going to have to use that training because we are really overextending our EMS to the maximum degree. Elaine will tell you as well, that they are really, really concerned about assisted living and the amount of resources that it's taking away from them to respond to people who are having actual emergencies. And this also lends to lift assistance. Our private pay facilities are using EMS to come and lift people up off the floor. And so we feel like if you have a resident, you need to meet their needs. And that's in the regulations already. And providing fall assistance and lift assistance, if they require that, you guys are going to have to be able to do some type of reasonable person, prudent level of lift assistance. So this is a pretty hot topic.
We are along those lines building, talking actually, and building as we go, what that would look like in your facility. So at minimum, you need to do these things. We've talked about, with regard to lift assistance, as Dee mentioned, prudent person would do. So you're walking down the street and you see someone flat out on their back on the sidewalk. You, a good Samaritan, what do? You don't call 911 necessarily. Typically you're looking and saying, what happened? Are you okay? Do you need some help? These are the things that we're sort of looking for in assisted living. Yeah, if the person says, I feel like I'm hurt. I feel like I'm hurt bad. I don't think I want to get up. You're going to call 911. So it's sort of a prudent person approach, and we keep talking about the Good Samaritan, or when you're at home with Dad falls. Dad, what happened? They tell you. Do you think you can get up? Yeah. Or no. It's that level of assistance that we're looking for in assisted living.
And I just want to say one more thing before we have a question here. We're trying to solve a problem with our facilities that just absolutely, positively will not do anything when somebody falls. That's what we hear from various EMS and fire officials that come to our department and meet with us and tell us this facility will not do anything. And that is, to me, that's bad, because what's happening is it's putting assisted living in the forefront of a lot of different people around the state to show perhaps that maybe our assisted living is not adequate. And so it's a really hot topic. If I could count how many times somebody's called and yelled at me over the phone about you all, and how we all don't have a regulation that requires you to do something different for lift assistance. I could probably show you pages and pages and pages of notes. It's a problem we have to solve. And so we're trying to think of how to do it in a way that's reasonable, but also that we don't have the automatic response that we just don't know. Question?
Yeah, you're right. It really is a hot topic, because over the many years that I've been working in nursing homes and in assisted livings, and even just recently we talked about we're not supposed to lift people because there's an assessment process. We're not supposed to assess those kinds of things, and that's why the ambulance is always called to do some of the lifts, at least in the assisted living. So I think something has to be done in terms of, what are you going to call that? Are you going to call that an assessment? Are you okay? Or what are you going to call that? What can we do to meet you and to meet the ambulance people in the middle of the road someplace?
So the task force that we've been working on this very topic with is a collection, very small group, because small groups get things done and big groups don't. But it's a couple EMS people, a couple assisted living people, and a couple people from the department. It's very small on purpose, and we're trying to talk reasonable person approach, and what minimally can we put in the rule to help guide you on minimally this is what we want you to do, no matter what we decide to call it, right? Here's the steps you need to go through. I'll tell you, we got to do something about it though, because in my research to prep for presenting this to the committee and establishing this task force to really work on the components of it, I read recently, I think it was, well, maybe not so recently, it might have been 2013, I'll have to look at my paper, but there's another state where the assisted living facilities are having such a tax on EMS that EMS dictates when new assisted livings can come to be. They charge. And they also say, we don't have the capacity for another assisted living in this county, therefore you can't. And so we have to do something, because I'd rather meet the need of the people that need this care than to restrict it for something like that.
So we are past 10 minutes into the next session. Do we have maybe a couple more questions, and then we can close this session and get ready for the next one? I know we kind of went over things fast, and I was trying to talk as fast as I could. Sorry. Okay.
Just a comment on the
Yeah.
falling. I agree, there's a lot of facilities that could do a little more to assess that and help. But with the emergency medical people, if those folks in our homes were out in the community falling, wouldn't they still be running around the community picking up people who have fallen? Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know that it's going to lessen the amount of falls they have to assist with.
Well, so what we're talking about is not that you're not calling EMS, but you're not calling EMS for someone who doesn't need EMS, and that you have the capacity to make some decisions. It's more about that. Yeah.
So one thing I'll leave you with is that a long time ago, when I worked in a facility, I was pretty much, here you are, be your administrator, things are a mess, can you fix it? Okay, see you, bye. And so I went to work at this facility, and things were a mess, and I didn't know where to start. And so, there was no policy and procedure book because I asked for one. We got to develop it. Oh, great. So what happened was, as the assisted living director, administrator, we had a large independent living beside us. And so nobody told me that we weren't supposed to lift people off the floor following a fall. So nobody told me that. So, I had my first resident, she fell, and I went up, and the caregiver called me, and I went up and I looked at her. I'm not a nurse. I've come from a therapy background. I come from working in a medical, physical, and occupational therapy background. Came up to this resident, asked her some questions, determined she broke her wrist, asked her if she had pain anywhere. She said no. Do you think that we can turn you on your bottom? We'll help you get to a seated position. Yes, that would be great. Call the daughter, asked the daughter to come over to take her to the ER because we felt she had broken her wrist. So this kind of went on for about 4 or 5 times, and then I finally realized that I wasn't supposed to lift. But in the meantime, Boulder, EMS, I had a gentleman from there come over and say, what's going on in your facility because we're not responding as much? Well, because I violated policy. And so they're like, oh. For a long time, they were coming to my assisted living because I was doing the assessment. I am not a nurse. I'm a reasonable person. And everything was going fine, I thought. And so I found out I was violating policy. So, I just think that we can come to a middle ground. We can really solve this because Elaine is right. If we don't solve this, somebody's going to go marching to the governor's office and say, assisted living was going to try to resolve this problem and they couldn't do it. And we're still being taxed. Somebody had to wait 4 extra minutes and they were having a heart attack because I had to go to the assisted living facility and lift somebody up on the floor that wasn't her. And that's the thing. So I want you to be open to what we're proposing and what we're working on. We're trying to get as many people around the table to give perspective so that we can think of everything. But it's something that we definitely have to change. All right, so we take...
do we take a break or we keep going? Keep going.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
5 minutes?
Yeah, 5-minute break.
Okay.
You got 5 minutes.